We would be nowhere without her.
Oh. Without her, thank you.
Any questions? So I think nowhere, let me remind you, is a very important place or atopos for Paul Celan. Wo are we? Hello, Zasve. Hello, everyone. I was making my way home, very pleased with my day, when the flow of my reveries was suddenly interrupted by the event which I must now relate. This is Rousseau. So, Lebenslauf, the title. Lebenslauf, or curriculum vitae, or walking the walk, or how to take a fall. A nano expose on chance, accidentality, unforeseen catastrophe, what comes around the bend telling us to bend over. What thus we cannot integrate, assimilate, or recuperate, with no reference to Thoreau or Robert Walser, ace walkers and troublemakers on the existential off-ramp of tracked being. Now a subtitle, no. Let me first thank Wolfgang for granting me the honor of kicking off this season's lecture series. But first, I know that we are in a full court squeeze as concerns world events, the ravaging and world emaciating explosions that seem remote, but nonetheless traumatically pitched at us. You may be wondering, some of you, what you're doing here. You are here to be attuned like a fine instrument, to sense and possibly sharpen your capacity for attunement, to get up close and personal, in fact, with your incapacitation. Today I want to think small, preferring the speck over the spectacular, and to pause before we consider what steps to take. We should not be afraid to look at so many archives of missteps. Taking a first step does not amount to following a prescriptive logic. Sometimes thinking makes itself unavailable to cognitive ledgers, and complexity overruns our ability to see straight. I want to stay close to the thought of overrunning and its cognates, which I intend to expose by means of a text of Rousseau, in fact, his exit text and last broadcast. I don't know if you know this about Rousseau, but he kept on ending it. He kept on saying, this is the last thing I have to say. And then suddenly he pulled up again and finally came out with it, so to speak, in the Reveries of the Solitary Walker. So I would like us to consider this text and what an exit text implies in the terms that Rousseau sets out for us. Let us first, however, situate ourselves. By the way, if we are French, which we may be, we would be situating ourselves for a few hours now. Let us get uncomfortable and struck by the fact that we are here in the sublime alpine regions where Kant situates precisely an aspect of the threatening overkill of the sublime. I will return to Kant momentarily, remembering how Lyotard, a patron saint of EGS, thought about the Kantian sublime, the unpresentable, about enthusiasm in Kant, and a cartography of collapse. We find ourselves, or rather lose ourselves, in the disfiguring dimension of the Alps. We find ourselves, or rather lose ourselves, in the neighborhood of Rousseau and the techno-monster Frankenstein, modeled after Rousseau, an object or thing or device or transformer that wandered supernaturally, murderously across these Alps. We are in a planned neighborhood, a Gegend, something you want to scope, and we are reminded by the great poet Paul Celan in his Bremen address that Gegend, or neighborhood, is linked to Begegnung, or encounter, and this is what I would like to consider also in terms of Rousseau and our inaugural maiden voyage tonight, our encounter, remembering the contre, or the counter in the encounter, the contre in the rencontre, or the Gegen embedded in Gegend, which Celan again links with Begegnung and Gegenwart, a kind of present, and also ein Gegenüber. In other words, your vis-a-vis, your interlocutor, the one who's up against you. And that you hear is very ambivalent, right? To be up against the wall, motherfucker. Or, I don't know where that came from. Or to be against someone can also suggest to lie on them and with them. So Celan opens up the dossiers and hearing resumes of what Gegen can imply and mean for us. In his case, he was seeking on another mountain an entgegendes Wort from Heidegger. So that would be a word or a language that maybe we ask of each other that counters or that poses in and as a rejoinder. What does it mean to ask for a rejoinder from the other? Well, this evening, as I said, I will be scaling a speck, not necessarily sizing the spectacular. I want to consider simply in terms of philosophical tracks and literary tropologies, the history of coming down the mountain. The lawgivers, the light bearers, the phallus wielders, the world-class illuminated came down the mountain. Socrates, Moses, Nietzsche, and Zarathustra. Maybe you can add to that black book. Faithfully came down the mountain. They delivered. Rousseau, for his part and parts, came crashing down a hill. So I think the fact that he traces and tracks the way he falls on a hill also pushes against a whole tradition of philosophical and literary positing. Rousseau makes us ask about postures and figures of thinking on the move, our relation to the path, remembering that in Greek, methodos is path. So what's our relation, our method, what it might mean more precisely to write, as Rousseau says, on the decline. He's writing on the decline. He's actually, in the second reverie, walking down and writing on the decline. It's a very Hölderlinian landscape. We can get to that in another life. So what it means to write on the decline, on an incline, only to lose one's standing. This is something, Rousseau is losing his balance, he's losing his standing, and he's coming to a kind of controlled crash. There's going to be an accident. And let me just fast forward to nowhere here. if you believe in accident, or that it was meant to be, the it referring to a chance or a chance encounter, as Derrida indicates reading Freud. If you believe in chance, then you don't believe in chance. Then it's destinal. It was meant to be. So it's not chance. And one can ask all of you involved in the different places and efforts of écriture, dance, performance, and so on, knowing Cunningham and others have tried to actually choreograph chance. Is that possible? What's our relation to chance? And Rousseau has a double accident that he talks about in the second reverie. One that he can control the landing even though it's devastating, and the other one that just crashes out of control. So a lot is at stake in these accidents and a chance encounter. Rousseau is met with an accident, and had we the time, I would want to probe with you the écriture of accidentality, even the ecstatic accident, such as those, or accidents, such as those described by Foucault and Barthes, a moment of extreme jouissance, delight, and a kind of affirmatory crash. The joy of losing one's bearings and bounds and even name, forgetting who you are. This is something described by many. I suggest Foucault and Barthes as starting points, but also by Hölderlin, the great poet, who took his cues from Rousseau. Hölderlin wrote, "Man kann auch in die Höhe fallen," meaning you can also fall upwards. Very hard to know what he meant. It could be an ecstatic, manic, uplifting joy, and suggest that the crash can also move upwards. Those of you who are reading cinema and so on may have noticed how Herzog and others can film waterfalls going upwards somehow, and how these ecstatic falls can't be really nailed in terms of directionality or movement that we control. Rousseau takes a historical and philosophical fall that throws into question the grounding of the ground. He slips, he falters, he trips up, and is momentarily mangled, resembling his cousin Frankenstein. Still, he teaches us how to break a fall. Before we go on, as if I could hold steady on the incline, I'd like to take a sidebar to say that I chose Rousseau for us today because many of us are confronted with the anxiety of withdrawal from the worlds that claim us. On an entirely other register, Heidegger calls withdrawal Ereignis, event. We have to proceed very cautiously and not just develop mashups of similar inclinations and vocabularies and bridges to nowhere. So I'm allowed to say this, but you're not. You know that Heidegger says this about withdrawal, which you would have to really have earned the trust of the universe to quickly throw in Heidegger in a Rousseauian kind of movement. Okay, I'm not sure I've earned the trust either. But I would encourage an arch from Rousseau's far niente, which he invents and establishes in the Reveries, which is a phenomenal letting go, the experience of letting go, to Heidegger's Gelassenheit, though there are quite a number of modalities, fissures, and incompatibilities to cope with. Rousseau put forward the political implications of a retreat. For the poet Hölderlin, Rousseau's withdrawal represented momentous teaching. When Rousseau withdrew into the mediated spaces of shade and shadows, out of the destructive Greek and helio, or sun-driven, heat of political action and overreach, something happened to us all. Now, Rousseau, let's just agree on this, on trust, or open a credit account for me. Rousseau exemplarily beat a retreat so that he could take measure, take steps in his promenade. Now, Paul de Man has noticed that, or noted that Schiller disastrously misinterpreted this back-off, and to such an extent and degree that we were disabled and blocked from reading Rousseau's decisive move inward, which was anything but a defeat. So Schiller laments the fact that Rousseau, at the moment where we might have needed him to step up or step it up, decides to beat a retreat. De Man points out, de Man, our reliable compass for ethical, political decision-making, points out that this is a disaster. Let me go to another absolutely reliable, lovable guy, Heidegger, who says a mistake like this, not referring to this, but a mistranslation or something, can take us out of the running, since we're working on running and walking, for decades and for centuries. So de Man, in a sense, echoes that sense that Schiller really fucked it up as far as understanding what it means to beat a retreat. So it might be that Rousseau's backing off of a very overheated historical and political moment could name anything but a defeat. Okay, I would like to go in a different direction, but let us consider the defeat in defeat. What happens to the feet at the moment of a crash or a fall, as when one loses one's footing, is KO'd, beaten down, and has to learn how to get up and stagger to the end without proper support or material sheltering. This is something that Rousseau feels he has to grapple with and learn and teach also. In the second reverie, Rousseau, bound to walk the walk in a certain cadenced way, here he joins Nietzsche on the path, takes a plunge or a fall that breaks into and reconfigures the flow of reveries, a text disrupted. You saw, I read when I opened this nano expose that Rousseau said when he was interrupted, the flows of his reveries were interrupted. A lot is at stake, including the textual corpus, because the reveries is the title. It's not just a theme that is embedded in the text, it's also the title that entitles and legitimates this text. So the text itself is under a terrible threat when the reveries are cut off in this way. Now, I very quickly did a drive-by mentioning Nietzsche hitchhiking along this way when we think about cadence. For Nietzsche, the essence of man, or humankind, or even transhumankind, can be pinned, and this is, of course, reductive, but what can you expect? This isn't I can't have the banquet last all night. But the cadence, learning how to end, learning the rhythm of a walk, the cadence is what is determining and decisive. This is something that if we had time, we would want to read bifocally, remembering that Derrida points out that Nietzsche is the affirmation of the same insight that Rousseau initiates. So Rousseau and Nietzsche are a couple that had the same insight, though Rousseau arrives at it and gets away from it with nostalgia, guilt, and distress, whereas Nietzsche says yes, yes to it. In Nietzschean, you have to say yes twice. and let the circuitry of the eternal return drive the yes. So let me disrupt my reading and start off my class next week with this walk and the question of the interrupted walk and how an accident can break one's stride in an existential way, but also textually, what is thrown into question, and how an accident of the sort that Rousseau invites or must endure ends up defacing and erasing memory and constitutes a kind of obliterature. So a lot has to do in Rousseau's final text with the kind of literature that obliterates itself. And obliteration is at stake for Rousseau because he not only forgets and loses his name and address, but it's then reported that he has died. So he gets to do what one rarely gets to enjoy, which is one's obituaries, slandering one, and one's funeral, in which no one has anything nice to say. So that is the second accident, which is when the rumor, and this is what knocks down Rousseau's text, is a sudden, a different kind of run, which in French is called the bruit qui court. So rumors are noises that run and outrun any author and can knock down and take down any oeuvre or textual corpus by creating another kind of run that, and if we wanted to talk about it, what is a rumor? Not only does it constitute a kind of disease spreading, it spreads without, it's a contagion, it's something that disengages from an author. The signature is obliterated and effaced and so on and so forth. So Rousseau, in the second walk, he comes home, he's totally mangled. He says nothing was broken and nothing hurt. So that's the first accident which he controls and in which he feels no pain. He's in a pain-free zone. But the pain arrives when the rumor of his death starts spreading, and this counter-text or anti-text of rumorological velocities and intensities take him down and take down his sense of legacy. So he's cut at the legacy. In French, you may know Les Legs or Legs de Freud is a text by Derrida, which doubly refers to the legs and legacy. Sidebar, beyond the pleasure principle, Freud proceeds by taking steps. So I'm also reading this in a not very obvious way. I just want you to think of the way that Freud takes one step after another in beyond the pleasure principle in order not to arrive also. So just let us think of steps, of taking steps, and what this can mean. I know this was condensed and displaced. I want to open up to a jam session with you, and I'm just presenting some initial scribbles. For now, maybe I can merely open the dossiers so that we can jam, if you are so inclined, on different figures, at times quite pumped up and athletic, that philosophy inventories for us. Think of the stroll. Do we still stroll, by the way? What is a stroll? What does it do to the walk? How does it inflect it or deflect it, maybe? The jump and leap, and Heidegger has a lot to say about these terms. What happens in a jump? What happens in a leap? Of course, then it can be metaphorically expanded to a leap of faith. The staggering and slipping, including the Freudian slipping, the floating and cruising, the hitting the streets or descending the mountain, or perhaps, and I'm also thinking of Benjamin's cruising and the way he named walking in a different way, of course. But let us consider what this locution means: walking the walk, walking the line, and the different walks of life that provoke, persecute, coach, defeat, or push us over the edge. So that was a happy intro to our conversation, and I'm sorry for the drive-by, but I thought I wanted to start with something that we could maybe talk about, and I want to call on you to start thinking about what has just been presented.